The year is AD 70, smoke rises over Jerusalem. The sound of swords clashing, shields shattering, and desperate cries echo through the holy city. Roman war horns blare as the legions of Titus storm the gates. Behind the flames, behind the chaos, stands one of the most sacred structures in the ancient world, the Second Temple of Jerusalem. For the Jewish people, it was not just a building. It was the very dwelling place of God on earth, the center of faith, sacrifice, and identity. And now, in the middle of blood and fire, that sacred temple is about to fall. This is the story of rebellion, of faith, of imperial might, and of devastation. This is the story of how the Jewish Revolt brought Jerusalem face to face with the power of Rome, and how one of history's greatest empires reduced one of the holiest cities to ruins. Jerusalem, before its fall, was a city of tension. By the mid-1st century, Judea was a Roman province, under the control of an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia. Rome demanded taxes, obedience, and loyalty. But the Jewish people, deeply religious and fiercely independent, struggled under the weight of foreign rule. For the Jews, there was only one God, Yahweh. For the Romans, loyalty to the emperor often meant honoring him as a god, or at least offering sacrifices in his name. To the Jews, this was idolatry, a direct violation of their faith. As the years went by, resentment festered. Heavy taxation, corrupt Roman governors, and religious insults added fuel to the fire. A historian of the time, Josephus, himself a Jew, who later served Rome, recorded how tensions reached a breaking point in AD 66. It began with an act of defiance. When Roman authorities tried to seize funds from the temple treasury, the Jews revolted. Zealots, radical fighters determined to resist Rome at any cost, took up arms. They killed Roman officials, ambushed soldiers, and declared Jerusalem free. The revolt spread like wildfire across Judea. Villages, towns, and even cities rose in rebellion. For the first time, the Jewish people dared to believe they could stand against the greatest empire in the known world. But Rome would not let this go unpunished. When news of the revolt reached Emperor Nero, he dispatched one of Rome's most trusted generals, Vespasian. A seasoned commander, Vespasian led legions into Judea in AD 67, crushing resistance town by town. His campaign was brutal. Mass executions, scorched earth tactics, and city sieges that left nothing but destruction. But in the middle of this campaign, Rome itself was thrown into chaos. Nero committed suicide in AD 68, and the empire plunged into a year of civil war. Vespasian was recalled, not to fight in Judea, but to seize power in Rome. By 69, he became emperor. And so, the mission to finish the Jewish war was passed to his son, Titus. Titus was young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself worthy of his father's new dynasty, the Flavian line. To him, the capture of Jerusalem was not just about crushing a revolt. It was about securing his family's claim to Rome's throne. In AD 70, Titus marched on Jerusalem with 4 Roman legions, battle-hardened soldiers numbering over 60,000 men, equipped with siege engines, catapults, and battering rams. Inside Jerusalem, chaos reigned. The city was divided not only between Jews and Romans, but among the Jews themselves. Factions of rebels fought each other for power. The Zealots, the Sicarius. The siege began in the spring of AD 70. Jerusalem was crowded with pilgrims for the Passover festival. Normally, this was a time of celebration, but with Roman legions encircling the city, it became a trap. Josephus tells us that over 1 million people were inside the walls: men, women, children, priests, and fighters. Food was scarce. and as weeks turned into months, starvation spread like wildfire. Titus ordered his engineers to build a wall around the city, a counterwall to cut off all supplies and prevent anyone from escaping. This brutal tactic ensured that hunger would weaken the defenders before the Romans breached the gates. Inside, famine grew so severe that Josephus records horrifying stories. Families tearing food from each other's mouths, mothers consuming whatever they could find, even whispers of unspeakable acts of desperation. Meanwhile, Roman siege towers and battering rams pounded the city's defenses. Archers unleashed volleys of arrows. Catapults hurled massive stones that crashed into homes. The Second Temple, rebuilt centuries earlier after the Babylonian exile and expanded gloriously by King Herod, was the pride of Jerusalem. Gleaming with white stone and gold, it was said to be among the most magnificent buildings in the ancient world. But as the Romans stormed the city, the temple became the last stronghold of Jewish resistance. Zealots barricaded themselves inside, determined to fight to the last breath. Titus reportedly wanted to preserve the temple, perhaps to dedicate it to Rome's gods or to showcase. After the fall of the temple, Roman soldiers continued their slaughter throughout the city. Streets once filled with worshippers and merchants were now choked with corpses. The cries of women and children were drowned out by the clanging of swords and the crackle of flames devouring homes. The survivors, those who had not been cut down, were rounded up. Josephus, who had by then defected to the Roman side and was serving as Titus's interpreter, described the horrific aftermath. The whole city seemed on fire, nothing left but heaps of ruin and corpses. Titus ordered much of Jerusalem torn down, its walls dismantled, its houses destroyed. Only a few towers were left standing as a grim reminder of what once was. But perhaps the most chilling consequence was what happened to the people. Tens of thousands of men were executed. Women and children were sold into slavery. Strong young men were forced to fight as gladiators in Roman arenas, slaughtered for entertainment. Others were shipped off to toil in Egypt's mines, a slow death sentence in the unforgiving desert. For the Jewish people, this was more than just a military defeat. It was the shattering of their world. The temple had been the very heart of Judaism, the place of sacrifice, the dwelling of God's presence. Without it, back in Rome, the destruction of Jerusalem was celebrated as a glorious victory. In AD 71, Titus and his father Vespasian staged a triumph, one of the most extravagant ceremonies in Roman history. Imagine the scene, the streets of Rome, overflowing with citizens cheering as the spoils of Jerusalem were paraded through the city. Golden treasures looted from the temple, the menorah, the table of showbread, the sacred trumpets, all displayed as trophies of conquest. Behind them marched thousands of Jewish captives in chains, forced to walk through Rome as living symbols of defeat. At the end of the procession came Titus himself, crowned with laurels, hailed as the conqueror of Judea. The Roman Senate declared him a hero, and monuments were raised to immortalize the victory. One of these monuments still stands today, the Arch of Titus. Carved into its stone are reliefs showing Roman soldiers carrying the sacred menorah from Jerusalem's temple. It is both the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 was not the end of Jewish suffering. It marked the beginning of the Diaspora, the scattering of the Jewish people across the world. With their holy city in ruins and their temple gone, Jews were forced to adapt. Many fled to other parts of the Roman Empire, to Alexandria in Egypt, to Antioch in Syria, to Rome itself. Others journeyed even farther, carrying their traditions with them into exile. Judaism transformed in the wake of destruction. Without the temple, the focus shifted from sacrifices to synagogues, from priests to rabbis, from rituals of the altar to the study of Torah. This change would ensure the survival of Jewish identity for millennia to come. But at the time, it was born out of unimaginable pain. For many, the destruction was not only political, but deeply spiritual. Had God abandoned his people? Why had he allowed the holiest place on earth to be desecrated? Different answers arose. Some saw the destruction as punishment for sin. Others clung to hope in the promises of prophets, waiting for a day when God... The destruction of the temple also had profound meaning for another emerging faith, Christianity. By AD 70, the followers of Jesus of Nazareth had already begun spreading their message throughout the Roman world. For them, the fall of the temple was seen not as the end, but as a confirmation of prophecy. According to the Gospels, Jesus had foretold that not one stone of the temple would be left upon another. When the Roman Romans burned it to the ground, many Christians believed it was the fulfillment of his words. This event marked a major turning point. Christianity, no longer tied to the temple or to Jerusalem alone, spread even more rapidly across the empire. The faith that began as a Jewish movement now reached Gentiles, moving toward becoming a global religion. For Christians, the temple's destruction symbolized the old covenant passing away, replaced by a new covenant in Christ. For Jews, it was a catastrophe of almost cosmic proportion. The destruction of the Second Temple remains one of the most significant events in Jewish history, and indeed in world history. For Jews, the memory of that day is preserved in mourning and ritual. Every year, on the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, Jews fast and lament the destruction of both the First and Second Temples. Even in modern times, Jewish prayers include pleas for the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the Temple. For Christians, the event stands as both a historical tragedy and a fulfillment of prophecy. For historians, it is a stark reminder of Rome's might and of the resilience of a people who, despite losing their holiest site, refused to lose their identity. The destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70 was a turning point in history. A city reduced to ashes, a people scattered, an empire triumphant. And yet, from those ashes, both Judaism and Christianity were reshaped in ways that would influence the entire world for the next 2,000 years. The fire of that day still burns in memory. The stones of Jerusalem still whisper of what was lost. And the lesson remains clear. Empires may conquer, temples may fall, but faith endures. This has been our journey into one of the darkest and most defining chapters of history.